Hello, fine individuals, and welcome once again to the Dr. Zero Free Magic Secret Show. I wasn't planning to do this broadcast, but it stopped raining, and there's a little bit of sunlight left, and I'm in the park, and I got everything to drink, so I might as well. So this quick little discussion will be about ancient Hebrew amulets. So we're going to do different shows in the future about amulets and different amulets from different cultures and traditions, but we're just going to stick to this right now. So, the prehistoric Hebrews, like the nations round about them, made use of uninscribed amulets to protect them from the evil eye and from hostile influences of every kind. Such amulets were made of semi-precious and precious stones, stones which possessed peculiar shapes or forms or were marked in some way naturally, berries of trees and plants, and grain of various kinds. According to Bischoff, animals could be protected from the assaults of devils and the evil eye by a fox's tail or by patches of some white substance placed between the eyes. A special stone was attached to the body of a pregnant woman to prevent miscarriage, and knotted cords or bands were tied to the newborn babe to preserve it from all evil. The prehistoric Hebrews probably possessed a far-reaching system of magic, but we do not know much about it. It is, however, quite clear that many of the magical practices which are made known to us by the Hebrew Bible were of very great antiquity and were winked at by the lawgivers and prophets because it was impossible to put an end to them. Moses himself was so great a magician that he defeated Pharaoh's magicians in their own arts, and when necessity demanded it, he set up the brazen serpent, the belief in the power of which was undoubtedly of pagan origin. The Hebrews inherited much of their magic from the Sumerians and Babylonians, and many details of it survived among the Jews and others even after into the Middle Ages. We read in the famous epic that Gilgamesh succeeded in obtaining speech when the spirit of his dead friend Enkidu, through the good offices of Ea, Nergal, and Saul, the Lord's anointed, had recourse to the witch of Endor, who must have enjoyed a great reputation as a raiser of the spirits of the dead, to obtain speech with the spirit of Samuel. Among the different kinds of Hebrew amulets, which are made known to us by the Bible, may be mentioned these following examples. 1. The Saharon, which was probably made of metal and had the form of a crescent, near the crescent moon. It was worn by women and by kings, and was tied to the necks of camels to protect them from the evil eye. The crescent was a favorite amulet among many peoples of Western Asia, and it represented to them the strength and protection of the waxing and not the waning moon. The Himyarites and other peoples of Arabia added a star to the crescent, and the Abyssinians adopted both as sacred emblems at a later period of the Turks did also. There's the Terrafine. These were small figures of men or of gods in the forms of men, presumably made of clay generally, but some were probably made of semi-precious stones if they were intended to be worn on the body. They seem to have been of the same character as the so-called papsukal figures, which have been described in the section on Babylonian amulets. We first hear of them in Genesis when we read that Rachel, the daughter of Laban, stole the teraphim of her father and went away with them when she accompanied her husband Jacob when he fled from Laban's house. The respect in which Laban regarded these figures is evident from the fact that he calls them, quote-unquote, my gods. And they must have been easily portable, for Rachel hid them in her camel's saddle. You see that in the Judges chapter as well. It is clear that although many men kept teraphim in their houses, e.g. David and Micah, who had a house of gods and made an ephod and teraphim, they were regarded as profane things and were associated with the heathen practice of divination. Before Jacob went to Bethel to present himself before Yahweh, he made all his people to hand over to him their strange gods, quote unquote, and earrings. And those were the crescent-shaped amulets. And he hid them under the oak, which was in Shechem. There were apparently several kinds of teraphim. Some were kept in the house or tent and were regarded as household gods, like the penates. Some were hung on the bodies of animals, and some were used for the purposes of divination. The last named class was condemned by the prophets, and Josiah put them away with familiar spirits and wizards and idols. Kings in Ezekiel 21 describes the king of Babylon using teraphim for divination purposes, and in connection with the shuffling of arrows and inspection of the liver of the slaughtered animal. There is no doubt that the Hebrews derived the use of teraphim from the inhabitants of Lower Mesopotamia, where, according to a tablet translated by Sidney Smith, the prophylactic and atropaic figures in a house were regarded as house property and were sold with the house. So, number 3, lahashim. The singular of this word is lahash, was applied to any object or ornament which was associated with the whispering of incantations, the whispering of spells or charms, prayers, etc., and was used as an amulet. The plural is found when the jewelry and ornaments, attire of the... Among them were certainly the lahashim or amulets, and it is very probable that every article of apparel possessed an amuletic character. Now we go to bells. These were attached to the skirts of the vestments of Aaron, the high priest, and their tinkling sounds were intended to drive away evil spirits. Isaiah suggests that women attached bells to their skirts, making a tinkling with their feet. The ancient Egyptians wore bells as amulets, and their descendants, the early Copts, followed their example and used them to drive away evil spirits during the celebration of the Eucharist. A bell of the Assyrian period, decorated with figures of animal-headed deities, is preserved in the Berlin Museum. And in modern caravans, horses, asses, and camels frequently have bells tied to their necks to drive away evil spirits. Number 5, figures of the gods. The Babylonians, Assyrians, and the Egyptians all wore figures of gods as amulets. Now the Hebrews, being monotheists and worshippers of Yahweh, of whom no figure could be made, when they wished to do as the heathen did, and wear or carry into battle figures of gods as amulets, they were obliged to have recourse to heathen deities. Thus, when Judas Maccabeus and his company went out to bury the bodies of the dead with their kinsmen in their fathers' graves, they found under the coats of everyone that was slain, quote-unquote, things consecrated to the idols of the Jamnites, which was forbidden to the Jews by the law. Judas decided that this was the cause wherefore they were slain. The Philistines apparently carried figures of their gods with their army when they went forth to fight, but when David defeated them at Baal Perazim, they dropped them and fled, and David ordered them to be burned with fire. Number 6, we have totaphoth, or phylacteries, i.e. frontlet bands which were worn between the eyes. They were made of skin of some sort and were inscribed with special formulas, most like psalms. Fillets or bandlets, thus inscribed, were to be worn either between the eyes or on the hand. Number 7, you have the Mezuzah. This word means a gatepost or a doorpost, and was given to a strip of leather, which was inscribed with the verses from Deuteronomy quoted above, and attached to the doorpost of the house. Number 8, the sisith, or tassel, or lock of hair, or fringe. This was made like the phylactery and mezuzah by divine command. It'd be consecrated and such. It had a way to do so, blah, blah, blah. There's no doubt that the totaphoth, mezuzah, and sisith were amulets, and that the use of them goes back into prehistoric times. Originally, the totaphoth were precious stones which invariably possessed the power of driving away evil spirits, and therefore has no need of inscriptions. Though there is no proof that the Hebrews in general, under the Mosaic dispensation, used amulets, it is tolerably certain that the pagan belief in their efficacy was tacitly and unofficially adopted by them, especially when, after they had learned to write, they could inscribe the great name of God and the names of his angels and passages from their sacred books on them. The pagan amulet was made efficacious by the words, the charm, or the incantation, which were pronounced over it by the magician or priest or physician of the time. But the words were profane and represented a belief in the power of the devils which the monotheistic Hebrew could not accept. But the object itself, whether it was a strip of leather or a stone or metal plaque, might be used by him provided the words pronounced over it or written upon it were derived from the Hebrew scriptures. The true history of the use of Hebrew amulets is, I believe, only to be derived from the Kabbalah, a very ancient work which deals with the Jewish mysticism in theory and practice. Assuredly, those who assert that the Kabbalah is not older than the 10th century of our era are in error. For internal evidence contains proofs that its authors borrowed many of their beliefs from Babylonian and Egyptian sources, which became available to them through the works of writers in Greek in the 1st and 2nd centuries. The early compilers of the Kabbalah tried, as Dr. Gaster says, to adopt many elements from other sources and to mold them in accordance with the fundamental principle of the unity of God and of the limited power of evil spirits. Popular beliefs know no rigid dogma, and much of that which is held to be strong and efficacious among other peoples is taken over in the belief that it would be beneficial. Many popular books have been written on Kabbalah, but they are untrustworthy because the writers make it evident that they have never read the literature of practical Kabbalah, which, as Dr. Gaster rightly points out, is still mostly in manuscript form. He goes on, it is found among the medical recipes as a recognized part of the medical practitioner who would use drugs and amulets indiscriminately or conjointly, for the use of the amulet is as widespread as any other medicine. There is nothing for which one or more amulets could not be prescribed, and the practice goes even further, for by means of amulets, such results could be obtained as the drug alone could not effect. The subduing of evil demons through the invocation of the aid of good spirits is only a materialization of higher spiritual truths. Faith is the underlying principle. And I just wanted to note some of this talk. This book is a good... this came out, I think, in the early 1900s. So it's like over 100 years old, this information. But it's still relevant because even if it's 100 years ago, it's still talking about ancient stuff. And by the way, this writer was a museum curator, so he knows what he's talking about. Okay, so the principal classes of inscribed amulets sanctioned by Kabbalah have been grouped by Bischoff in his Elemente de Kabbalah and may be briefly described. The simplest of them contained merely extracts from the Bible. Another favorite extra, blah, blah, blah. The Keteb, or noonday devil, was greatly feared, and the words rendered by terror by night and pestilence were the names of terrifying devils that cause sickness. The Psalms. So this is just a long-winded thing about explaining how the Psalms can be used as magical, the rituals speak, the true rituals speak. The Psalms can all be used for this. So you had inscriptions on amulets that, were supposed to play into sickness. And of course, this is all superstitious, blah, blah, blah. And this ties into the formula of abracadabra, which is all about abrasax, or abraxas, as we also know. And that's a whole nother video there. But abracadabra and abrasax, these are important. I'm going to skip this for now, and you guys should just look into it if you don't know. So, la-di-da, deedle-dee, deedle-dum. Now they're talking about some Moses stuff. Nobody wants to hear about that. We know about YHVH, but now, we're stumbling onto, the red-haired ones stuff. Oh, those things. Yeah, the red-haired one. The dark feminine energy. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what the Jewish people really thought. And now, again, this is Jewish mythology. And there's a lot of people who will say, and this is fine, I accept this, that the archetype of, what Lilith would be, or the archetype of what Satan would represent, or the archetype of what Samael is, or any of these hard, thick entity-like things that seem to have been around forever, they've had a lot of names. So, say, for instance, the Jews are misrepresenting what a lot of people would see as the true Lilith form and all this stuff. They're just scared of it or whatever, that's their interpretation. The Jews are still describing a very certain kind of demonic entity dealing with sex and whatnot. So the question is, they're pointing towards a very specific demonic thing when they talk about this. So let's just say from the standpoint of those demonic things, if such things exist, that's in its own world. And at Dr. Zeero Xiron's free Magic Secret show, we just talk about superstitious stuff. We don't say if anything is real or not, because we don't make that call here. The one thing that should be said here is, again, this is the dark view of this branch of magical beings. So let's just go to the old source, okay? So this, I'm just going to cut right back into the book here. Amulets to protect pregnant women and women in childbed were as common among the Hebrews as among pagan nations. They were written upon parchment and also upon the door and walls of the chamber wherein the women lay. And if they were to be really effective, the text had to be written in ink in which holy incense had been mixed. And even the copyist had to be a man, ceremonially pure and a believer. One of the most important and powerful childbed amulets is reproduced on the opposite page of the blah, blah, blah. It's from the Book of Zeero. And this is where most of the anti-Lilith spells, if you want to go to hard, main, old school, ancient Judaism that talks directly about this concept and this idea of it and this sort of thing, the Book of Zeero is where to go. That's sort of like the that's the source there. And then also, that's a book you want to read, even if you're pro Lilith and trying to gut this mythology out of it. This is a very important place to go, because the truth is, if you want to free the concept of Lilith, free the entity, however you feel about it, if you want to free that from the mythology, Book of Zeero is a place to go. How do you separate? How do you help people change that perception? So that's a little magical advice to anybody listening that's on the left-hand path maybe today. Re-represent material that's horribly misrepresented, but what do you do? It's such a topic. Yes, it is. I know that's what you're thinking. Yeah, it is a topic. It's a long one. And one day I'll have a one about talking about a Satan. Now, just because I'm not talking about Satan doesn't mean Dr. Zeero hasn't had a conversation, at least with the archetype, the subliminal subconscious archetype of Satan and the devil in all kinds of forms and masks, because you can say from that point. And to be honest, Dr. Zeero as a person, well, I'm not really a person, I'm just an entity, but as a person, the old school Lucifer, the one in the suit and the tie, the swanky one with the martini, that's just totally, in control. That's one of Dr. Zeero's favorite fictional tropes of all time. He likes that version of Satan, Lucifer, quite a lot, because that version you can insert. If you have writer's block, you're writing a story, you're writing fiction, you got nothing going on, you can't figure out where to go, have that version of Lucifer walk in the room, watch your story come back alive. Think of all the great stories of humanity that book would have sucked if Satan or Lucifer didn't come in. So you say the devil never did anything good for you? You should watch The Devil's Advocate with Al Pacino. Never mind Keanu Reeves' accent. Just watch it for Al. So anyway, returning back to the point here, we're talking about these things. So the text word off, any evil which you will, blah, blah, blah. So it's not so fun looking at it, the text, but I'm telling you, go to the Book of Zeero. You're going to get all the super deep Lilithian, if you wish, information with this. And now it talks about Cornelius Agrippa, 3 books of occult philosophy. I have to mention that at least once on the show. This is exactly where you want to go to learn all kinds of information. You learn about magic squares. I don't need to tell you about that. You should look into your own. Hebrew amulets. So that's actually, we're going to wrap up today, because actually this book, I thought they'd have more talk about the demons of the air and the demons of the moon and the sex demons and such. And that side, that's actually a different book. But I hope you got some interesting information out of this speech today. It's kind of a hodgepodge. I wasn't expecting to do it, but hey, it's important to get some key things out there. So hit the subscribe button, let people know I exist. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, folks.